I walk through the hydroponics hall, a hover tray floating at my shoulder level. The air in here is extremely refreshing. There is also a tranquil glistening of bright light off the surface of the nutrient-rich water, which trickles past the roots of the ship's crops. It really is a shame I can't spend prolonged periods in here. Well, I could if I were prepared to visit Dr. Gatto and receive a stern telling off for allowing myself to receive a toxic quantity of oxygen. Best not. I have things to do anyway. I still find it absurd that Deathworld crops would grow so fast that they actually raise the oxygen to levels toxic to most garden worlders. I can't help but be a little jealous of the triple M's. They can spend as long as they like in here. They describe it with words like energizing, invigorating, and restorative. I exit the pretty room and begin making my way bowward along the wide corridor of the ship's neck. I take a moment to glance out of the portside windows and then the starboard. This is an enormous hangar. I never would have tolerated the docking fees to rent this space, preferring to conduct any business from orbit via shuttle. Ludicrous to think that the Terran military are just giving the time in this hangar away. Lieutenant Loper essentially wrote us a carte blanche. The only qualifier was within reason. We might have struggled to find an authority willing to even take surrendered pirates off us in garden world or space. The situation never really came up before Terrans crashed onto the scene. If pirates attempted to board you, you either got away, killed them all, or far more likely, were all killed by them. The scenario of pirates surrendering just never happened. As a result, no planet's legal system was equipped to handle it. We would likely have been told that there was nothing they could do, as they only had the jurisdiction to enforce laws on their planet, in their local system, and on their ships. An out-of-system ship engaging and surrendering pirates in open space was not processable. That might be less the case these days. Terran behaviors have a habit of inveigling themselves into those of other species. In Terran space, we come to tell them we've apprehended pirates, and they waive our docking fees, offer us a bounty and finder's fees, and give us a hearty thank you. I still can't work out what it is that rankles me about accepting that bounty. Starting my career, if someone had offered me an enormous heap of money for doing something I'd already done, I would likely have accepted without a second thought. Now, I feel guilty? For what? Doing the right thing and being rewarded? Did I do the right thing, though? I did the thing that I was told was most likely to keep me alive. It just so happened to have a just result. And shouldn't the right thing be its own reward? Is it right to accept a reward for just doing what anyone should? Ah, there, I noticed it this time. That's a Terran mindworm working its way into my brain. Ha! Even my Terran crew are telling me to accept the bounty. Terrans are the ones offering the bounty. There is such a thing as too noble. I chuckle to myself as I climb the shallow angle stairway to my quarters, taking each stair with 2 to 3 steps. My door opens to reveal the 3 most precious people in the galaxy to me. Korak, asleep on our perch, Victor, sat in a human-adapted chair he's brought in and smiling broadly, and sat on the palm of his hand, chirruping delightedly as she wrestles his gentle index finger with seemingly all her might, my daughter. I'm certain Victor has noticed me enter, but he's not given the slightest indication of it. Victor? Yeah, Cap? He says, emerald eyes still fixed on the puffball as she rolls around the palm that could crush her like a dandelion mane. I knew he'd noticed. I gesture at the hover tray. What are these? He looks up and frowns in puzzlement. I was not expecting that. They look like toys, Cap? He asks more than tells. I can see that they're toys. I'm not dense, I chitter wryly. What are they for? He shrugs. Beats me. They look really good, though. That's the bright plume? And is that a Merc Beast plushie? You expect me to believe that these toys have nothing to do with you? You know nothing about them? Still shrugging, he answers, Wish I could take credit, Cap. But no, nothing to do with me or anyone in Triple M, far as I know. Where'd you get them? They were in the shipment of cleaning supplies that just caught up with us. Hamtonio and I were inspecting them. They were in one of the crates. Victor stands, keeping his kakak cradling hand as steady as a gimbal, and walks over. One-handed and with no visible effort, he picks up the bright plume miniature that it took both me and Hamtonio to lift onto the tray. He inspects it. The detail's excellent. Almost feel like I could look through the Triple M common room window and see us sitting in there. He puts it down and picks up the plushie. That was light enough for me to lift, but too bulky to carry easily. Kakak notices. It's gorgeous. I want the one, he says admiringly. You have the real thing, I say incredulously. Yeah, but she's at the uni right now. Plus, this one's small. You just had 8 small ones for weeks, and she'll be done weaning him back with you before you know it. He shakes his head mirthfully. Apparently, this is a lesson in the art of cute appreciation that I am not yet ready for. Tekek extends her wing claws and talons to the plushie, fixing it with an expression of clear longing. I'm sorry, my child, I would give this to you if it were mine, but it isn't, I say, distressed. She keeps reaching for it as Victor places it down on the hover tray. Clearly distraught in the way that only one brand new to existence can be, she turns up her head and cries to be fed. My crop heaves, but is empty. Fuck. Victor, the one she's crying at, strokes her tummy and says, Sorry, baby. If I did what you want me to do, my stomach acid'd melt you. I'm getting it, says Korak blearily. He hops from our perch and walks to Victor, who hands him Takak. Thank you, sweet fruit. Mine was empty, I say apologetically. He waves his wing in a gesture of no problem, his mouth being otherwise occupied. Victor turns away and fixes his eyes on me. His tolerance for crop feeding is apparently not infinite. Cap, he says, clearly attempting to distract himself. If you found him in cleaning supplies, they're probably Glarks. Maybe you should talk to him about him. Or they might be toothless as Glark and Bammy are so cute together. You hear he just popped the question. Garden worlder as he might be, these toys definitely fit my chief custodial officer's personality. I'll do that, Victor. This evening, I think. Let's send them away before Takaka can get upset about the plushie again. I indicate to the hover tray that it is to return to the point where I activated it and it leaves the room. All right, Victor, we have appointments to keep. Korak, will you be all right on your own? His mouth still at Tekak's. He raises a wing claw and a Terran thumbs up. I burst out laughing. That was certainly unanticipated. All right, we'll be off then. I smile at my life mate and my daughter. I feel a little guilty about abandoning him, but that is what paternity leave is for. Later, Victor enters a wide piazza with a large case containing the damaged plasma blades of him and his team, held effortlessly in his right hand, and me perched atop his opposite shoulder, eating some fruit slices on a skewer. How are Mouse's new limiters working out for you, Cap? I smirk. Well, they're engaged, and I'm attempting to crush your shoulder right now, you tell me? A moment's pause. Yeah, it feels like someone behind me wants my attention and is trying to get it by squeezing my shoulder. But, they don't want to be too rude. I smirk. Do you want to try with the limiters off? For thoroughness? No, he answers instantly, causing me some amusement. A moment passes. Victor, why am I not allowed in Triple M at the moment? It's hard not to be apprehensive. He smiles. No worries, Cap. We're just painting another panel to the mural. Want it to be a surprise. I think this one will give you some pride. That does not assuage my apprehension. What could they possibly have to muralize? Us going to the university, getting drinks? Victor confronting the soldiers off the boarding ramp? If the latter, then there would surely be no reason for me to be barred. As we cross the piazza, we hear the strumming of a musician's instrument, followed by mournful words that I do not understand. Is she not wearing a translator? I look to the woman, sat by a fountain with an acoustic guitar. She definitely has a translator equipped at her temple. By the father, Victor's musical tastes run so highly to the intense that I had almost forgotten the seemingly infinite range of music that Terrans are capable of producing. Like with all things Terran, the variety of their music is such as to equal the rest of the non-Terran galaxy combined. Though I don't understand a word of it, the pain and longing pierces my hearts. Why can't I understand her? I ask Victor, only noticing at that point that he's also stopped to listen. She probably can't speak Japanese, just learned the song by rote. I assume she knows well enough that she's not declaring war or shouting out abuse, but the words themselves. Humans can learn an entire... I stop myself. Of course they can. This is nothing to be surprised by. It's a really sad song. I used to listen to it when I felt lonely. Victor states simply. You understand it? I ask. Yeah, Miyazaki gave me Japanese lessons while I was at uni. Her dad was Japanese. Don't know how many people there are who can say they've had Japanese lessons from the Jane Blitz Miyazaki. I think about asking him to translate it for me, but I decide instead to simply ask, what is the song called, Victor? Without looking away from the musician, he answers, it's called Kimi Datara. Cap. Translates to, if it were you. We watch the musician play the rest of the song in silence. Her playing is entirely enrapturing. As neither she nor I speak Japanese, it is impossible to say whether she falters over the pronunciation or word order. But if she does, she certainly manages to avoid giving any indication of it. When she is done with the song, Victor takes out his holopad to flick a small digital donation to hers. He explains that, while she will almost certainly receive a salary from the local government for her public playing, the custom is left over from a time when buskers relied on tips to live. If you stopped to listen and enjoyed, tradition dictates that you donate. I think for a moment before I unclip my holopad and replicate this Terran custom, before Victor walks on. The busker begins playing another sad song in yet another language that she apparently does not speak. This one is called Somoru Vasarnap and is also known as the Hungarian suicide song, according to Victor. I truly hope that busker is all right. Here we are, declares Victor, gesturing upward to the building. Zanzibar Mpia's most reputable purveyor of firearms, according to Loper. I look up at the enormous building. The fact that there could possibly be a private gunsmith this size, even on a planet with 6.5 billion inhabitants, boggles my mind. Victor walks inside. Later, you're sure I can't talk you around? The manufacturer says that it's almost as good as an analog for resistance to interference, says the personable associate. Victor smiles and shakes his head. You talked me around on the translator interface and targeting. You were right. I was being paranoid, and it was making me throw the baby out with the bathwater, but anything that might electronically stop a gun from going click and boom when I need it to, it's non-negotiable. My pool of potential deputies are all going to receive thorough firearms training from me, which I am fully licensed to give them. So whitelisting ain't necessary, and the firearms themselves are going to be stored in my quarters and the quarters of my subordinates. So there ain't a need to worry about them being nicked and turned against us. Just the ones that go click and boom, please. All right, sir. You want to try out your selections on our range? Queries the clerk. Victor nods. Yeah, I would. He turns to me. You want to stay here, Cap? You don't need to come. I think for a moment before answering, I'll come. I want to see what I'm spending the ship's budget on before closing the two of my eyes that are still natural, thus having a need for eyelids, to effect a Terran wink. Victor laughs. All right, Cap. Good to know what you're paying for. The clerk shows us through to a long room, most of which is segregated from us by a barrier with gaps at roughly Terran waist to head height, with wide margin of error, seemingly to account for the stunning variety present in humans themselves, let alone other Terran species. The clerk gives Victor a pair of earmuffs and me a soundproof field generator. He apologetically explains that they don't have any headsets that would fit me, that the noise of firearms being fired repeatedly can be damaging even to the hearing of Terrans, and that Victor is being given earmuffs, which only dampen rather than blocking the sound intentionally. Sound is apparently one data stream that will allow my CSS to assess these guns for quality. I nod and activate the latest addition to the array of welfare devices on the sash strung across my chest. Victor starts with the selection of shotguns he's picked out for himself. He picks up the first, levels it at his shoulder, and fires over the countertop. The explosion is silent to me, but I feel the vibration through my feet. The extent to which the recoil forces Victor's solid frame to account for it is frightening. Handheld firearms are an invention, nearly exclusive to Terrans. Every other species use explosively propelled weaponry for cannons and other static placement weapons, if at all. Experiments with handheld, explosively propelled weapons invariably met with the answer that they were non-viable. To have enough kick to do damage to what you aim at, they need to have enough for the recoil to shatter the bones of a garden worlder. Handheld ranged weaponry needed to wait until we had developed kinetic pulse weaponry and laser weaponry, which Victor describes being shot by us like being punched and like having a cigarette put out on me, respectively. Terrans express general disappointment that it's the post-contact space age, and the most advanced weaponry is still boomsticks. I'm not exactly sure why. Terrans do have a tendency to never consider anything finished. All their technology is just a placeholder until something better comes along. You've got a good CSS captain. He knows his stuff and clearly cares about keeping your ship safe, not just because that's where the woman who cuts his checks comes from, comes the voice of the gunsmith, causing me to start. He stepped inside my field without me noticing. I recover from being startled and consider his words. Yes, I'm extremely proud of him. He's my daughter's godfather, you know. The man is clearly surprised. I know. I didn't even know what a godparent was until earlier this cycle. Your species' customs are extremely viral, I voice. He laughs. I could say the same for garden worlders. It's getting rarer and rarer that people come in looking for anything other than firearms choked up with safety features. Pre-contact, we had the ability to make guns that could lock out unauthorized users. But we'd all sort of agreed that such features were gimmicky and too prone to being subverted. We just trusted in the licensing and training of users to keep people safe from accidents. Historically, there were countries where you didn't need any training at all to buy a firearm, and they would accept home defense as a valid reason you needed one. I'm glad we eventually came to our senses about that sort of thing. I laugh. Yes, there was a brief discussion of the possibility of using a nanoforge to remove the safety features in our existing supply of firearms. Victor utterly shut that down, citing that subverting a civilian nanoforge to be capable of making or modifying weaponry was a crime. Your species can be sticklers sometimes. He chortles. We watch as Victor expertly fires off each of the guns he has picked out. I don't think he misses a single shot, even without the aiming reticule being projected into his vision via his occipital lobe. As he tests, he sorts them into two piles, a large pile, which I infer to be the rejects, and a small pile, which I infer to be those accepted. Victor was quite disappointed by his subordinates' declaration that they didn't wish to be the boyfriends waiting for their girlfriend to be done, shoe shopping, and that they would trust him to pick out the best firearms that met with their specifications. That was a rather amusing exchange, even if it was fraught with cultural touchpoints that missed my beak. Having made his selections, Victor turns to us and indicates to take down the soundproof field. He converses with the clerk regarding his selections, the quantity of ammunition he wishes to take for them, and the time frame of the waiting period and repairs of the plasma blades. At the end of this, the clerk tallies the total we owe and flicks it to my holopad. It's pricey, but you really can't put a price on a properly secured ship. I pay it. Victor heartily shakes hands with the clerk, followed by the clerk very gently shaking my wing claw. We smile and wave as Victor leaves, me back atop his left shoulder. Later. Whew, I really did not expect gun shopping to take all morning, proclaims Victor. Well, don't relax too much. We still have one more stop before we're off duty for the day, and I imagine that this one will be somewhat more mentally taxing. I chide gently. He laughs. You got it, Cap. I'll stay wired for what's coming. We keep walking for a while before our destination comes into view. We draw up to the building that looks like it was designed by a committee of utilitarian garden worlders, fighting with artistic Terrans. Zanzibar Empia's Office of Deathworlder Relations Consulate, I state, looking up. It takes me a moment to realize that we've ceased moving. I look down at Victor, his face a mask of apprehension. For all his flippancy, he's clearly still worried about what might be to come. I rest my wing claws on his head, causing him to look up at me. I smile. Let's go in, shall we? Victor? He smiles back and nods before stepping forward. Victor and I sit in the waiting room. His foot taps nervously, and I nestle into the seat next to his. A while ago, he commented that the Throljek woman who showed us in here looked like a Draenei, which is apparently a race from a centuries-old Terran media franchise, but he hasn't said anything since then. She just looked like a relatively normal Throljek female to me. Throljeks are somewhat dissimilar to Terrans. It is curious that the variety of life on Earth means that Terrans have an apt animal to compare half the sapients that they encounter with, and the variety of their imaginings covers the other half. Most garden worlds have no more than a few hundred unique animal species, compared to the millions of animals that call Earth their home. To Terrans, Rakali are secretary birds, Rethij are giant squid, Shouuso are pink elephants. The notion of creating an imaginary race, purely for entertainment, would be concerning to a garden worlder without familiarity with Terrans. Just then, another testament to the rich tapestry of Terra enters the room. She's a Neanderthal woman who stands noticeably shorter than even Jenny, though what she lacks in height, she more than makes up for in bulk. I don't believe I've ever seen a more solidly built human. Her face is expressionless, and her voice monotone as she strides up to Victor and says, "Stand up, I need to frisk you." Victor's face breaks with recognition. "I know you. You're a Thran Gimli hunter, the galaxy's strongest unaugmented woman." She gives no reaction to the recognition, positive or negative, as she says, "Please stand up so I can frisk you." Still clearly starstruck, Victor stands and spreads his limbs. She roughly passes her hands over his lower portion and then hesitates. The gnome through 5 million height differential is such that if she wants to reach his shoulders, she needs to get close enough for full body contact. Her face shows no discomfort, but Victor wordlessly kneels for her to complete her frisk. That done, she turns her mossy green eyes to me, and terrified about what a frisk from potentially the galaxy's strongest unaugmented woman might mean for my fragile bones. I stand, spread my wings out, and complete a full circle to reveal that I am concealing no weaponry. I truly hope that satisfies her. Hope. It seems to... She jerks her head to indicate that we are to follow. Victor lowers his hand to a level where I can step onto it, then raises it, allowing me to step to resume my perch on his shoulder. We walk down the high-ceilinged corridor behind the powerfully built woman. It's somewhat ludicrous that we needed to be searched for weaponry, despite the fact that we passed through a detector on the way in and were, at that point, informed that the whole building is monitored by an AI who will sound an alarm if any unauthorized weaponry is detected inside. Belt and braces is the expression I believe Victor would use. It can't hurt to be sure. The stocky woman indicates a door before saying, "I will be waiting out here. If I hear sounds of distress or the activation of the privacy field, I will enter with intent to neutralize," in a flat monotone that leaves little doubt as to the meaning of the word neutralize. Victor and I smile and nod, though my smile, unlike his, is definitely colored by fear. We walk through the door and are met by the sight of an uncannily familiar Terran that I'm certain I've never met before. She wears a sort of robe, dress. She wears an outfit which is an assortment of greens that glisten with an iridescent luster, and very peculiar shoes that seem to have the style of sandals, but with the base carved from what looks like wood and raised on downward protrusions toward the front and back. She has pale skin and jet black hair, though with either dyed or modified gray streaks emanating from the top of her hairline to the back of her tightly tied coiffure. Her eyes are a vivid purple, though she's certainly not a Chwani. Those must be modifications. Surely, with Region Tech now ubiquitous across Terran space, I can't be certain as to whether she's 25 or 125, but she certainly has the bearing of an older woman. She stands and Victor bends to allow me off his shoulder. So, these are the pilots of the ODR's Terran Security Officer program? I've heard excellent things about both of you from my sister, speaks the woman, radiating self-confidence. What is she talking about? Whose sister might she be to have heard good things about us? I quickly run through all of the human triple M's and rule them out as likely candidates for one reason or another. Given that this is Mazia's planet, he would be the most likely candidate. But he's male, and from what I know of human ethnicity, none of them look like they share a close biological relationship with this woman. My mind is spared the effort of gronching under the strain of attempting to resolve the enigma by Victor saying, "You're Emiko, Miyazaki's little sister." The mystery woman smiles and nods, making her no longer a mystery. She is now Emiko, though I'm not quite sure of the implications of that. My mind is still wheeling somewhat. She notices my befuddlement and says, "I'm sorry, dear, I can see I've perplexed you. Why don't the two of you take a seat and we can begin? Our indirect relationship to each other has little bearing, but I'll go through it so it's not bothering anyone." Victor sits in the human-adapted chair. I climb atop the Urkali-adapted perch, and Emiko resumes her seat behind the desk, with a Zanzibari vista visible through the window behind her. Emiko, Miss Miyazaki starts. "Mr. Taylor's right, I'm Emiko Miyazaki. Jean and I share a father, though we were born on different planets, about 14 years apart and never had a real-time conversation until after the peace made FTL comms available across Terran space. While she was overseeing Mr. Taylor's piloting of the SO position, she and I talked about him, his Ricali sponsor, and the program rather a lot. I feel like I already know the two of you quite well, though entirely parasocially. Do either of you have any further questions about any of that?" Having recovered from the blindsiding, I answer, "You've covered it quite well." I look to Victor. "I think both of us are more interested in the contract your employer is offering. Right, Victor?" He nods. "Very well," smiles Miyazaki, tapping her holopad to darken the window behind her before flicking a video to display on the wall to her left, my and Victor's right. This is footage that was captured by a long-distance, semi-true AI-piloted probe, surveying an unnamed death world in the Outer Rim, and relayed to the ODR's central office on Citadel around 7 months ago. Please watch. The footage shows a snowy forest of pine-like trees. It must have either been captured in the hemisphere's winter, or the whole planet simply has a frigid climate. The trees clear, revealing the brow of a hill. What makes us think this could be a sapience-bearing planet is just coming up, informs Miyazaki. The footage crests the hill and unveils a broad valley, also heavily forested, but in the middle of this valley is a hill, with a cleared patch of land topping it. And at the center of that patch is what looks like a village that appears to be made of white woven cloth. It's somewhat difficult to pick it out from the snow, until the camera magnifies the image to reveal dwellings with large, indistinct, dark shapes moving between them. I mean, that ain't conclusive. Building shelter is far from sufficient to determine sapience. Tons of animals build shelters, opines Victor, the side of his face showing a contemplative frown. Wait for it, smirks Miyazaki. A few more moments pass before a loud crack sounds from the footage, and the video is suddenly showing only overcast sky. Victor sits bolt upright, his body is tense as if he is readying for action. I'm rather at a loss. A moment more and the footage cuts out. Bloody hell, swears Victor. Miyazaki nods knowingly. Looking between these two, who clearly know something I don't, I say, "Would one of you care to enlighten me?" Victor turns to me, his face blanched. "Those probes are built like tanks, Cap. The shells on them are like 1.5 centimeters of Durasteel. Same stuff Terran armor's built out of. Most Deathworld animals are wary of them because they're unfamiliar and don't look particularly appetizing. It actually makes studying zoology, using them, quite difficult. Something managed to sneak up on that probe and take it out, without being seen. I mean, it ain't impossible that it was just an uncharacteristically brazen and stealthy animal. It ain't impossible that it was a one in a billion fluke, like it got hit by a meteorite or whatever, but it sort of seems like when you put it together with the settlement, it captured footage of something was tracking that probe, identified it as a threat, and met it with sufficient force to destroy it. That's much more convincing than the village. Miyazaki nods appreciatively at Victor. Someone's done their homework, or is an avid fanboy of the search for Death World sapiens. Victor's face flushes. I ask, so where is this planet? Wishing to distract from the embarrassment that Victor is, for whatever reason, feeling about his unusual level of knowledge on the ODR's probes. In answer, Miyazaki pulls up a 3D projection of the entire galaxy from her holopad. That's not a good sign. Here, says Miyazaki, indicating a red dot on the outer end of the Orion Cygnus arm, is where we are now, Zanzibar Mpia. She changes the display to highlight a mostly contiguous area, largely in that arm of the galaxy, but spilling over into the arm we just came from and the next one along, as well as having a few exclaves from more intrepid settlements, further out in a few enclaves. From garden worlds that happen to be located within it, is Terran space. She highlights a dot in yellow, almost precisely on the opposite side of the galaxy, is survey planet AG 10790263b. That's the planet we're after. We've left it unnamed, as, with the possibility of it being sapience-bearing, we want to give the natives the chance to name it themselves, if there are any. Both Victor's and my faces fall. That's a year's journey from here, comments Victor dejectedly. Miyazaki gives a mirthless smile. Did you think it would be a brief jaunt over to the next galactic arm? That you'd be laughing along with your new Death Worlder friends in a matter of weeks? I interrupt here. Miss Miyazaki, that was uncalled for. We have come here in good faith to listen to the ODR's proposal and not to be insulted. Her face momentarily shows surprise before she rights herself. My apologies, Captain. I can see I crossed a line. I meant no offense. My sister did tell me that you can be rather fierce when the occasion strikes. I must admit to not fully believing it until now. I give a satisfied Terran nod. I think my CSS's reaction has a little more to do with the fact that this is almost as inconvenient a place as we could wish to start from, much as I don't wish to pass on this contract. Are there not more conveniently placed Death World research ships? Ones located closer to this planet? She smiles and nods. There are, but, well, after what happened the first time the GU made contact with a Death World, the ODR is determined not to make any mistakes this time. We want the best. You are the best. I cock a brow tuft. The best? In answer, Miyazaki flicks a spreadsheet to display on the wall. This is your ship's incident report log, filed with the ODR. There are precisely 394 incidents reported since the start of Victor's tenure aboard, roughly one every 8 Terran days on average. Everything from mild stomachache resultant from consumption of unidentified Death World berries to mauling from Death World fauna. I frown. That's a strange way of defining best, Miss Miyazaki. She smiles and shakes her head, flicking another nearly empty log to the display. Not when we compare it to the list of fatalities from the same period. There is only one name on this list. Researcher Halby, who died in his bed of heart failure around 3 years ago. I still remember Victor and his people's bright white mourning colors as we cremated Halb. It hit him quite hard. One death in nearly a decade, and not even mission-related. That's so good that we've audited you several times thinking you had to be covering up fatalities. If you are, we've not found any indication of it. Also, your last report indicated that you'd hired not only additional SOs, but non-security Terran staff as well. Your ship is a shining example of what is possible when Death Worlders and Garden Worlders collaborate. I also can't pretend that there isn't a political aspect to this as well. The original pilots of the ODR's SO qualification being the ones to convey ODR representation on a Death World first contact. It would be a moderate propaganda coup. There's also the fact that you just arrested a crew of pirates to consider. My face and Victor's screw up in mild disgust. I know, says Miyazaki with a placatory wave of her hand. I don't like being a woman who has to consider the public perception of things like this. I didn't do a degree in doctorate after the war was concluded to be worried about politics. However, there is still a persistent issue with people rejecting the ODR's prescriptions as governmental overreach. The better we're perceived, the less likely it is that Garden World captains decide that Death World research is lucrative enough to get into, and damn it if they're going to be told they need a Terran with their excursion parties. Our good image saves lives. Seeing the sense in what this woman is saying, but still not liking being used as a poster girl, I ask, so, would it be you we are to convey to this planet, Dr. Miyazaki? She raises a finger and says, If it's all right with you, please just call me Emiko. Dr. Miyazaki was my father, and yes, she winks, only the best. Victor gives an excited jerk, causing me to start, and exclaims, Is that why you're under guard by Thran Hunter? Is she gonna come too? Dr. Miyazaki. Emiko laughs through her nose and says, Just so, Mr. Taylor. I can see you're familiar with her exploits as a bodybuilder, though if you're looking to seduce her, I don't believe you'll have much luck. Victor shakes his head with a frown and says, Is a guy not capable of admiring a woman without it being construed romantically? I'm merely a fan, is all. I'm quite happily paired already, thank you very much. I'm unsure whether I should interject, but decide to back him up. His partner's about as far from Miss Hunter as it's possible to get while remaining humanoid. I know that humans are capable of eclectic taste, but my intuition, for whatever it's worth, is that he's telling the truth about not having that sort of interest in Miss Hunter. Miyazaki laughs heartily. All right then. With that vouching, I have no further worry about things becoming awkward, Mr. Taylor. Nodding, I continue. So we would likely need to reinforce several dorms to be Deathworlder resistant. We've only got one so far. I mean, we have 34 dorms and command quarters, so that's around 360 private rooms, only around 200 of which are currently filled. But we only have one, which is reinforced 10 rooms, half of which are currently occupied. It would be less if not for the fact that Terrans have a proclivity to couple up, and, having done so, move in with each other. I assume you'll want to bring more than just yourself and Miss Hunter? I assume you'll also want space to accommodate any Deathworld delegations we might bring back to the Parliament on Citadel? She smiles, seeming pleased. Very perceptive, Captain. The full complement of staff we'll be bringing has not yet been determined. If you refuse this contract, we will likely have to start from the ground up with our second choice, located in an entirely different part of the galaxy, so we haven't actually approached anyone who doesn't already work for us yet. It would likely be around 15 Terran staff, with a similar number of ODR Garden Worlders who would be sharing their dorms. Then we would want 2 dorms for a delegation from this new Death World, if the stars align for that. We'll pay all expenses for those upgrades. We can hire crews to have it done in less than 3 weeks. I smile. My maintenance team are extremely good, Dr. Amiko. I'm sure it wouldn't take them much longer than that themselves, but if you can find people who are happy to work alongside and take advice from Garden Worlders, I would be happy to take you up on that offer. She nods, I'll see to it. Oh, and when the contract is complete, you can keep the upgrades. We won't send repossessions officers to tear out all the valuable parts we gave you. Think of it as a perk. Speaking of, you'll want to know what your remuneration is going to be like for this job. I smile. I fully disclose my ship's earnings to the ODR, as well as the GU's tax collection. I'm guessing you wouldn't have invited us here if you couldn't afford us. She smirks. Quite so. Before flicking something from her holopad to mine, which I unclip to check. The figure nearly knocks me off my perch. This is twice what we would make in the same period as you're proposing to engage us for. With a look of smug satisfaction, she says, When you're employing the best, you can't be cheap. 50% of that up front. The rest on completion, an additional 25% again, on top of that figure. With successful contact with natives of AG-10, 790263B. Swallowing slightly, I look to Victor. His eyes alight with hope, I say, Ma'am, I very much want to accept this contract right here and now, but I can't speak for all of my crew. I shall have to fully disclose the details and put this to a general vote when I get back. I don't imagine it will be rejected, what with the baseline level of valiance I select for in my hires. Plus, the quantity of hazard pay I'll be able to offer alongside it, but I won't go against my crew if they decide this isn't worth it. Is that acceptable? She frowns and nods. That's fine, Captain. But we aren't ready to disclose the potential fact of a sapience-bearing death world besides Earth yet. I'm afraid that if you want to put this to a vote, it will need to go along with an NDA. I can send you the wording of the NDA we've been using. Is that acceptable? Satisfied, I say. If it's the same one I had to sign to read the offer in the first place, then I already have it. That's no problem at all. She smiles. Well then, if you'll allow me, I'll give the two of you the full brief on AG-10790263B. She pulls up some complicated-looking charts. As you can see, its atmosphere is approximately 19% oxygen, similar to Earth's, however, unlike Earth's. One extremely lengthy brief later, Victor walks from the building with me perched on his shoulder. He's clearly lost in thought. My own head is still swimming. I extend my wing to rest my wing claws on the top of his head. How are you feeling, Victor? He frowns, like it's too good to be true. Like this can't be that perfect. Like someone's playing with me somehow. He sits down on a low wall. Like what if it was just social animals that probe was looking at and a freak accident that destroyed it? Terrans truly are emotional. but that's something to love them for. I hop down and turn to look him in the face. Victor, I can't promise that we will be the ones who find another planet of Deathworlders. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps those shelters were erected by animals acting on instinct rather than people acting on inspiration. Perhaps we go out there and find nothing. If we do you think you can survive it? Will you consider it a waste of time to have taken this contract if we find nothing? He fixes me with those emerald eyes and says, You're right, Cap. It ain't worth working myself into a tizzy over what might happen. I'll survive if this turns out to be a disappointment, and whatever happens, it won't have been a waste of time. I smile and wink before hopping back atop his shoulder. Let's go, Victor. We have a vote to compose. Veterans. The Triple M's, Shings, and I stand in an open town square nearby Baharia Kaskazini. Terran security being what it is, Dr. Zunbury wouldn't have been able to collect us from there. So this is the agreed meeting place. I look around at the others, all dressed in a fashion they call smart casual, aptly named. I can imagine them socializing at a gala or relaxing in their common room in these clothes. Even the Shings have emulated the style. It almost makes me wish that Rakali wore clothes. I'm sure that any outfit I attempted to fabricate to match this style would look ridiculous. For the combination of clothes already looking extremely unnatural on my species, and the fact that I'm sure my mind wouldn't be able to reproduce the subtle nuances of it, the way theirs effortlessly seem to. I have to settle for having a slightly nicer sash for my welfare devices. For a nanosecond earlier, I considered digging out my old medals to pin onto it. But, well, Messia has told me that the one whose house we're visiting is a veteran of the opposite side of the same conflict. It would probably be in poor taste. Plus, all of my medals amount to congratulations for not dying. Not really anything to be proud of. I also believe that displaying medals might not be conducive to the casual part of smart casual. Just then, a clear tube with an ornamental conical nose, ornamental swept wings, and a single occupant sweeps near silently over the square before dropping to touchdown in front of the group. And Kasiogi Zunberi throws open the access door, smiles, and says, Get in, nerds! We're going to dinner! There is a general chuckle as the group begins advancing on the transport capsule. We file inside, and Dr. Zunberi explains, We'll be able to accelerate to Mach 10 over the Northern Ocean before we have to decelerate to Mach 2 to pass over the other side of the settlement band. Over the agricultural zone, we can start accelerating again, so we'll be able to get up to Mach 16 over the equatorial desert. Should take no more than a few hours to get to the rainforest zone in the southern hemisphere. Mizia puts a hand on his sister's shoulder and asks, Your two aren't coming? She shakes her head and says, No, unfortunately, Lul is still busy with homing your merklets, and Amale, wasn't feeling up to it. They've both said they'll come next week. He nods and no more is said about that, as the capsule begins to rise above the buildings surrounding it. It darts forward, and everyone outside the gravitic compensation fields of me and the Shings sways from the motion. I experience a moment of fear as I believe there must be a malfunction with the capsule's inertial dampening. Then I realize that Terrans probably wouldn't consider inertial dampeners necessary on a planet-side transport. As to be sure. Dr. Zunberi, there are no inertial dampeners on this transport, are there? In answer, she puffs through her nose and says, No, sweetheart, no inertial dampeners. We like to feel the acceleration. Also, call me Cass, all right? I nod assent as the coastal city disappears behind us. I spot something in the water below. Rather, I spot two somethings. Two very large somethings, one much larger. What are those? I ask the group at large. Mizia answers me, They're whales. I think they're blue whales. That's a mother and calf. Having spent nearly 15 years in close proximity to a Terran and, for much of it, having actively studied all things Terran, I've of course previously been aware of whales, but seeing the sheer scale of them, it's something different. Just as they're disappearing behind us, the mother gives a slight sideways jerk, and my mind fully comprehends that that enormous thing is a conscious, aware being, not a submarine structure, not a semi-sunken ship. That calf had to be as long as this transport, I exclaim. Mizia laughs and nods. I'd guess so too. I think about 15 of the mother would equal the length of the bright plume. My mind boggles. Messia spends the rest of the time we fly over the ocean, explaining to me the peculiar evolutionary history that allowed baleen cetaceans to achieve their gargantuan sizes, the struggle that they faced with humans of the past hunting them, mainly to turn their fat into lamp oil, the necessity to clone certain species back from extinction after the ocean acidification event of their late 21st century, and the fight that Terrans have been undergoing in Parliament to get them recognized as sapient. Obviously, our uplifts get full recognition, but really, whales are just as intelligent as us already. There's just a bit of prejudice against them because Well, it's difficult to build anything or make any technological breakthroughs when your finest manipulation is a tongue the size of an elephant. They can't really join the community of spacefaring species. When they fare the stars, it's in tightly controlled hab tanks, made by humans. We always get their consent, of course. Had mother and child are almost certainly the descendants of blue whales, who agreed to be brought here to help with the health of the marine ecology. It's much easier to get permission now that we have translator tech. We had to go through some pretty ludicrous workarounds to understand them before. I smile. My translator informs me that you are mentally capitalizing their species name, the way Terrans do for sapiens. You're clearly sincere. He gives a soft chuckle. Yes, well, a bit of respect is the least I can give them after what my species has put theirs through. Humans have a habit of making a mess. Looking out at the coast of the Northern Ocean, coming back into view, I say, yes, but my experience of your species is that you're also very good at cleaning up your messes. He smiles, a skill you have to learn eventually. We pass at a relative snail's pace over the coastal habitation zone then, accelerating on over the verdant agricultural band. Eventually that gives way to scrub, which in turn gives way to scorching desert. Dr. Zunbi, Kaz raises her voice to say, the capsule is indicating that we're going to pass through a pretty heavy sandstorm. Won't be a problem, but we'll lose visibility for a minute or so. Don't be alarmed. Sure enough, an enormous front of dust looms before us. The ship dives in, limiting visibility to a few meters outside in any direction. I see those who are not benefiting from the gravity fields jerk and sway with the increased turbulence. Roughly 90 seconds pass before visibility clears. That storm had to have been hundreds of kilometers wide. At the speeds we're traveling, I wonder what they do when storms pass into the habitation zones. Well, it's clearly not considered apocalyptic if it does happen. It certainly would be on any garden world. We enter into a biome that I'm informed is called savanna. We see great herds of grazing earth fauna, in quantities I have heard of, but again, not grasped before now. The bulk, Cass tells us, are wildebeest. But she also points out zebra, elephants, giraffes, water buffalo, gazelles, and many more kinds besides. She tells us that these animals provide food for a rich array of carnivores, including lions, hyenas, leopards, cheetahs, painted dogs, and resurrected African saber-tooths. If there are any carnivores down there, I don't see them. The density and height of trees steadily increases until we are flying over a thick canopy, through which the ground is rarely visible. The capsule comes to a halt in air and begins its vertical descent. Gesturing out at the thick forest, Kas says, "Welcome to Msitu wa Mvua, Sisi's and my home." We touch down on the landing pad and disembark before the capsule departs, now passengerless. Just as it is on the verge of vanishing over the horizon, Dr. Zunber, Kas rounds on me and the Shings. "You've all got insect repellents, right?" No and I both gesture to the devices clipped to our fronts. Nan gives an embarrassed, "Err." Kaz rolls her eyes and says, "You'll have to stick close to your wife, Furball. The biting insects aren't a problem for us. We eradicated all known insect-borne diseases centuries ago, but I really don't want to discover a Fulgenzian reaction to mosquito bites to my CV, understand?" Mazia steps in at this point and, bending down to offer his back to the Shings, says, "It probably wouldn't be a problem for them, Cass. The only reason most humans are allergic to mosquito bites is the fact that such a large portion of our ancestors died of malaria. They, not having evolved on a planet that has malaria, would have no reason to have adapted a congenital adverse reaction to them." His sister cocks an eyebrow before saying, "I'm sure you don't want your boyfriend to be the guinea pig for that hypothesis, Cece." Messi and the Shings all look embarrassed. Victor offers me his shoulder, and Hasiak is given a stern lecture from Kays about how even though we will be walking on paths, and even though the toughness of her underbelly scales is an order of magnitude above anything that might be found in a garden worlder, she is to be closely on guard for any thorny plant matter that may have fallen on the path. If a thorn works its way under her scales, septic shock may result. She seems sufficiently affrighted by the lecture. The group makes its way from the clearing into the dense jungle. The canopy is so thick that, even with the intense light of the twin Zanzibari suns beaming down overhead, the environment is dim. The forest consists mainly of broadleaf plants with waxy cuticles. As Kaz warned, many of the plants are thick with thorns. The whole biome is a cacophony of animal calls. It's rather unnerving to think that almost every animal I can hear is one that could kill me if I were not under guard by the group of Terrans. Toon walks next to Victor along the cobbled path through the woods. He takes her lower left hand with his right, and they pull close, tenderly. It's only slightly awkward for me, being on his opposite shoulder. I swivel my head to look behind at Krish, Hasyak, Jenny, Sam, and Samus behind us. Then back forward to look at the Zunberis leading the way, with the Shings astride Mazia's back. We walk for some time before a large house, mounted in the canopy, comes into view. Coming to the foot of a flight of stairs, we begin to climb. The fact that all of the Terrans have the stamina to be able to undertake such a climb without even a complaint after the length they just walked is remarkable. There is a brief question mark as to whether Hasyak will be able to make the climb, not having feet. But she laughs and relays that living in a galaxy where foot analogs are nearly ubiquitous, you learn how to climb stairs. We come to the top of the stairway, and the canopy-top dwelling is unveiled. We are greeted by a group of humans, the bulk of whom look uncannily like Mazia and Kaz. They are mostly adults, but there are 6 children of various ages that I infer to be nieces and nephews. There is a cheer as the family members come into view of each other. Mazia is swamped by siblings, cousins, and children. The Shings are required to hop down to avoid being crushed. The younger children may have no memory of seeing this man outside of a screen. Then she parts the crowd. Her bearing is such that I do not need to be told who she is. It does not require my noticing her copious scars, prosthetic arm, prosthetic leg, and prosthetic eye to mark her as a veteran. There is something in the way she holds herself that conveys that louder than shouting. She may still look like a woman in the prime of her life, but the deference the rest show her marks her as their matriarch. I'm a little envious of the level of respect she has shown. She steps to Mazia and, pausing a moment, she pulls him into a firm embrace. "It's good to see you, son," she says, somehow managing to sound heartfelt through her stoicism. He pats her back and says, "It's good to see you too, Mum." The two pull apart and the matriarch looks Mazia up and down. "You look well. Not too skinny." He smiles. "Yes, I've been taking care of myself, just like you taught me." She gives a satisfied nod before saying, "Come, all of you. Dinner is ready. With so many we need to eat on the balcony, I assume no one minds that?" There is a chorus of agreement that the balcony is a fine place to eat, and we all file off in, presumably, its direction. As I pass the scarred matriarch, she fixes me with those eyes. One natural and as black as coal. One mechanical and somehow even darker. She stares with some intensity. No hostility that I can detect, more like appraisal. Yes, she's giving me the same appraising eyes that her daughter did when I first met her a few days ago. Only it feels like comparing a candle in a forge in terms of ferocity. I definitely don't like being so heavily appraised by Deathworlders. Most of a dinner later, I look at the last of the grilled mango half that was provided in accordance with my dietary requirements. It's really too much. This may be a snack to a Deathworlder, but its calorie density is straining my capacity to consume it. Steeling myself, I scrape up the last pieces and swallow them down. If nothing else, this will provide for very rich crop milk for Kakak. By the time I get back to her, I'm sure it will have been sufficiently broken down and diluted by my secretions that spoiling her with Deathworld fruit won't be a concern. I look around at the rest of the table. With 24 Terrans present, it is impossible for even them to carry out a single conversation. Therefore, they have broken themselves up into 6 or so conversation units. Victor sits to my right. He offers me refill of the juice I've been drinking, and I accept. This feels like a fulfilling moment in life. Just then, I feel a strong hand on the back of the Terran chair I'm nestling into. I turn my head to look into the fierce gaze of the woman whose guest I am. "I was wondering if you might care to come for a speeder ride with me, Captain," asks the woman, clearly leaving no room for refusal. Victor starts to object, but I throw out my wing to stop him. "It's all right, Victor. I would be happy to accompany Wing Commander Zunberry on a speeder ride," I say, my voice filled with far more confidence than I feel. She nods approvingly, and I tip the remainder of my drink down my gullet and get up from the chair. "It's really all right, Victor," I say as I pass him, his face still a visage of concern. The woman leads me to a platform on which is a shining land speeder. She hops astride it, and after a moment of unease, I follow, clinging to her back. Once I am in place, she kicks it into gear, and it steadily levitates above the forest canopy. She engages its acceleration, and we dart forward at a frightening pace. My compensator keeps me from feeling the worst of it, but she's not sparing the throttle. After a few minutes, the Southern Ocean comes into view, and she sets us down on the shore. Glad to have a reprieve from the speeder ride, I hop down. I turn to the mother. "I'm certain it wasn't just to show me the sights that you invited me on this speeder ride, Wing Commander." She gives a mirthful puff of air through her nose, but her face and body remain placid. "You're right, Captain. I wanted to get the measure of you. You are my son's employer, and it sounds like you might be my daughter's employer too, soon. Can you blame a mother for being concerned?" She crosses her biological and mechanical arms and fixes me with that same appraising expression she did earlier. A little perplexed, I answer, I'm afraid, ma'am, if I am to be Dr. Nkasyogi Zunberi's employer, I am unaware of that fact. Could it be that she is going to be subcontracted to my vessel via the ODR? The woman smiles and nods. So, you are going to attempt to make contact with another death world? I thought so. Why does the ODR even bother with NDAs when Terrans exist? I'm afraid, Wing Commander, that I'm unable to confirm or deny that supposition of yours, I say carefully. She nods, clearly not needing me to confirm or deny, and seats herself on the beach, her green satin dress becoming somewhat sandy. I walk to the woman and seat myself beside her. May I ask a question, Wing Commander? I ask, looking out at the ocean vista. She nods, ask. You've clearly been through at least one round of regeneration. Why didn't you allow your missing limbs and eye to be regenerated? Why didn't you allow your scars to be healed? She gives another mirthful puff. I could ask you the same thing, she says, gesturing at my bionic leg and eyes. How did she instantly put me on the back foot? Stammering slightly, I say, Well, I only got these recently. I haven't had the chance to have species-appropriate regeneration yet. She nods, and when you get to a place where it is convenient to have that leg and those eyes regenerated, will you? I have to think for a moment. No, I don't think I will, I answer carefully. And why not? Asks Wing Commander Zunberi. Again, I'm forced to consider. I suppose there's the improved capability of these eyes and this leg to consider, she queries. And is that all? Thinking further, I answer. No, there's pride, I suppose. She turns that fierce, appraising death worlder gaze on me. Pride? I stand back up and wheel to face her. Yes, I'm proud of having done what I did. I'm proud that by my action, my boy, your son, our friends, my ship, my life mate, my daughter, and my crew were all saved from death, or a fate worse than death. I'm proud of that. I'm defensive. How has this woman managed to make me defensive so quickly? The wing commander nods and says, There's your answer. She gestures with her natural arm at the dark brown elastomer sheathing of her mechanical one. This is a painful memory for me. The day I lost my arm, my leg, my eye, and my husband in a war that forced me to leave my children in the care of an AI caretaker. But, nonetheless, I'm proud. I'm proud of the part I played in preventing my people's extinction. That's why, whenever I go for a round of regeneration, I ask them to set it such that my eye, limbs, and scars are spared. In a softer tone than before, I ask, Do you hate me? She scoffs. What? Because you happen to be the same species as those that took my husband from me? I shake my head. Because I am a woman who fought against your species' survival. I may never have landed a shot on any of my targets, but I definitely tried to. I would have been thrilled to have been a woman who could claim she'd shot down a Terran. She removes her gaze from the horizon and turns it on me. And had you managed to score a kill during the war, how do you think you would feel now? Do you think you'd feel proud of that? Instantly, I answer, No, of course not. I fought on the wrong side of that war. I fought for cowardice and prejudice. I fought to eradicate a species I thought I understood, but didn't at all. I wasn't fighting Terrans. I was fighting my own imagination. I was fighting against what I thought Terrans were. If I had managed to actually kill any of you, the way I definitely tried to, I would have been racked by guilt about it until my dying day. I'm already racked by guilt just for having tried. She gives a light smile, seeming satisfied. Both sides of that war thought they were fighting for survival, Captain. Your side was incorrect. I don't begrudge you your service, nor would I if you had been the very Rakali who had taken my husband from me. I judge you to be a sincere woman, and therefore, I am happy to give you my blessing as my children's employer. I'm somewhat shocked. Is that it? I ask. You took me more than 200 koanas from your party to have a 3-minute conversation? A conversation we could have had inside your house? She raises an eyebrow. You're unsatisfied? I can grill you further if you want. I give an exasperated puff before seating myself in the sand beside the formidable woman. I don't think I wish to be grilled further, Wing Commander. She smiles. Please call me Naipanoi. Pride. Pit, pit, clink is the sound of Korax and my feet as we step from the starboard lift on Deck 5. It would have been much quicker for us to glide down from Deck 17, but a little rude, given the company we're in. Victor walks a few paces ahead, his footfall silent, as we cross the bridge that connects the ship's central section to its starboard. I can't wait to see this panel that you've all been working on, I say with a bemused smile. I can't wait to see the first one. I'm still not exactly sure what a winged hussar is, but seeing Takal imagined as one sounds interesting, says my life mate. I wouldn't base your image of the winged hussars on our artwork, Corey. We went for style over accuracy. There weren't any merc beasts knocking about Central Europe. For 'em to make mounts out of, smirks Victor over his shoulder, managing not to break pace or course, despite the several seconds his unidirectional eyes are not aimed forward. We draw up on the balcony of Triple M and hear the clatter and whir of improvements being made to the decks below us. Since the 84% positive vote came back on our ballot regarding whether to take the ODR's contract, the crews have been working near non-stop with the guidance of the Bright Plume's own engineering team to reinforce the requisite number of dorms. It's a good thing that privacy fields exist, or the works would be denying sleep to nearly half the ship. Around 5% of my crew gave their notice, accepted their severance pay, and have either already departed the ship or are taking the offer to be conveyed core ward before deboarding. It was a bit of a blow. It's known that the ship can't run without a replacement for, but it still feels like losing 15 friends. The inhabitants of starboard dorms, 0. 4 all accepted reassignments to dorms on port side or starboard dorms, 6. 17. I offered them a small stipend each for the inconvenience, and, as best I could, accommodated all mutual requests from crew members who wished to be placed in the same dorms as each other. I think at the start of my career, I'd likely have just told the computer to send reassignment notices and then deal with any complaints as they came. We draw close to the common room door. Victor indicates it to open and says, "They're here, guys." There is a flurry of activity from a portion of the room still occluded from view. After a few moments, Victor seems to be satisfied that the preparations are made and steps over the threshold. The Triple M's are all bar fluffy who's still at the university, arranged around what they have designated as their mural wall. Triple M Art Gallery is proud to present its second collaborative work, under lead artist Msiamaje Zunberi. You've wondered and marveled at our previous work, The Hussar. Now, Victor pauses his showman affectation here, allowing Korak to ogle the panel depicting me, wearing armor and sat astride Fluffy in our battle charge. Messia and Brunhilde are stood to the right of that panel, holding up a cloth which presumably covers the next entry in this gallery of theirs. Now, without further ado, we are proud to present. Victor raises his upturned palms toward the sheet suspended between his doormate's hands and flicks them down, signaling Messia and Brunhilde to release both sides of the cover in perfect coordination. Pride! The mural depicts a savanna scene with seemingly every kind of animal you might find in that biome, their faces turned toward a monolithic landform, acting as a podium. I stand on this rock platform, facing the host of animals. My legs strike a power pose. My wings are raised above my head, holding Takak in almost the posture that I named her, post-hatching. Only she's not facing me. Rather, she also faces the multitude of animals. Behind me stands a smiling Victor, his copper hair imagined more than octuple in volume, when compared with reality, enfolding the bottom of his chin and spilling down his chest in a thick mane. Beside him stands a smiling Korak, reimagined with noticeably feminine Terran characteristics. It's beautiful, everyone, but I scrutinize the painting a few seconds more. I can't help feeling as if this might be a cultural reference that's missing my beak. Victor's face breaks into a broad, tooth-bearing grin that will never cease to give me a small jolt of terror as something buried deep in my instincts screams, "He's about to eat you! Fly away!" I said, "You probably ain't seen this one." I'm so glad I was right. Toons converted it to 350 FPS in preparation for us to show it to you. You both up for a movie night? I narrow my biological eyes. How long is this film you want to show us, Victor? Many Terrans have the ability to maintain unflinching concentration for hours at a time, meaning that, if you're not careful, you can get roped into movie marathons that last horrors for 12 hours. About an hour and a half, not that long by our standards. He smirks. I cock a brow tuft and answer, it's just one, right? He nods. There are sequels, but they ain't quite as good. We only have the original ready to show you guys. All right, I tentatively accept your proposed movie night. I say, Korak, will you be staying? Korak still seems a little lost in the murals, but eventually answers, yes, I think. I'd like to understand the reference of this painting. Great, cries Victor, clapping his hands together once in satisfaction. We'll start getting everything ready. Brunhilde frowns. Is Takakak going to be okay on her own? I chuckle. She isn't on her own. Twyla is very kindly babysitting her for us, gesturing at Twyla's holographically projected form. Twyla nods and summons a live picture feed of my daughter, snuggling into her new Merc Beast plushie, a gift from my chief custodial officer. Every Triple M lets out an adoring, ow! Robotic appendages enter the view, and, synchronized with her holographic arms gesture, I've got a decanter of crop milk for if she wakes up. She has her plushie tucked into the incubator with her. She's fast asleep, and if she wakes up and I don't know what to do, I can alert her parents immediately. Isn't she just the cutest? wiggling her fists in front of her chest and her mechanical appendages in front of the camera feed, in a gesture that seems to indicate that she's having trouble restraining her reaction to all the cute. I turn to Toon. Before we start this film, may I have a private word with you, Toon? She looks alarmed, saying, Me? Sure. Would my room be okay? I nod and she leads the way. Victor looks as if he would like to follow, but seems to decide that he either trusts me, trusts her, or trusts both of us enough not to interpose himself into this. She leads me to her room and says, I just need to tidy up a bit. Do you mind waiting a moment? Her cheeks flushed noticeably purple. Ignoring her obvious embarrassment, I gesture for her to go ahead and she disappears into the room. I wait outside the door for a few minutes. My understanding is that Victor has mostly moved into this room as well, sharing the living space with Toon. The same is true for Jenny with Brunhilde and Haysiak with Krish, though in those cases, their rooms could be reappropriated for new triple M's. In Victor's case, he has maintained his claim on his old room, it becoming a den for Fluffy and the host of the near-nightly Cuddle Puddles. The now 5 spare rooms will be filled by Emiko Miyazaki, Miss Hunter, Lieutenant Loper, and 2 more who are yet to be determined. I wonder if Dr. Zunbi, Cass, will wish to share a dorm with her brother? I've still not heard whether she actually will be joining us from anyone. She probably hasn't decided yet, understandably. It seems as if she has a life on this planet and is aware of the hurt that might be caused by her decision to leave for a minimum of 2 years, having been left by both parents at age 4, one of whom never returned, from what Wing Commander Naipanoi Zunbury told me, and then watching her brother leave as well, as an adult. I won't say anything to Mazia until I'm certain she's coming. I don't want to divulge her secrets or play with Mazia's hopes. Toon reemerges and gestures me inside, and still with that worried look on her face. She sits on her bed, and I climb on her desk chair, which she has arranged to face her current position. So, what's this about, Captain? Are you a me no longer needed? That's isn't it? You don't need someone on a mission to a sapient death world who's so. In irritation, I raise a wing claw, and the start of her gibbering self-doubt ceases. Dear girl, you must value yourself more. I just gave you a raise. Weeks ago. Why would I have done that if I was considering letting you go so soon afterward? I say, with a calm but firm tone of voice. She turns her worried eyes down and to the left. Maybe, you changed your mind? Maybe you only gave me the raise, so it wasn't obvious you were going to sack me. Maybe you weren't planning to, but giving me the raise made you realize I wasn't worth it. Unimpressed, I answer, Yes, dear girl. And maybe the Titan tears apart the side of the ship and skewers me on her spear. You can't live your life in maybes, Toon. Why don't you listen first? Then make a decision about whether what I say is worth panicking about. Choking back her panic and forcing herself calm, she nods. I begin, Emiko Miyazaki has transmitted over a route suggestion. Her route has a few possible planets where we might make our stops to meet personnel hired from elsewhere in Terran space. One of these planets caught my eye. Nova Fennoscandia is your homeworld, correct? My question, Toon, is would you like us to stop on your planet for a few days before we pass into Garden Worlder territory? Clearly blindsided, she takes a moment to respond before answering, Really, I'd love that. I feel sort of guilty for being the only one to have that opportunity. No one else's homeworlds were on the list. I shake my head. Not that I could see, no. I'll lock in Nova Fennoscandia as a stop then, shall I? She nods enthusiastically, smiling. Excellent now. Shall we rejoin the others? I say, making to leave. She throws out a hand in my direction, indicating she wishes me to stay. I stop and turn to her, brow tuft raised. That's really it? You're really okay with me? I smile. More than okay, dear girl. I'm thrilled to have you aboard my ship. Your self-doubt is the one thing about you that I would say needs work. Shall we go? She smiles and we return to the common room. Victor's immediately at Toon's side, looking up into her luminous eyes with a concerned expression. All good? Better than good. I'll tell you later. She smiles, bending to kiss him. No more is said about that as Twila indicates a perch facing the viewing wall that is large enough for me and Korak to share. Once we have climbed up, I notice that everyone else is still stood, and I squint, quizzically, at the triple M's who are stood at the side of the space that is about to become our view screen. Showman persona readopted, Victor starts. Tonight's opening number will be given by a live performance, backed by the original score, sans lyrics. A man of many talents, Mizuyamaji Zunberry, will be on lead vocals with the rest composing the chorus. Immediately, my wing shoots up. Victor, if you are all planning to sing, perhaps just check that the privacy field is engaged. He raises his finger, opens his mouth, screws up his eyes, and pauses a moment before saying, Good shout, Cap, and running over to the control panel, sheepishly engaging the privacy field. Without further ado, he says, indicating Twila to start playing the film, and melting into the chorus, stood behind Messiah. The film starts with a blood-red sun cresting the pitch-black horizon. As Messiah cries out with passion and volume I had not imagined him capable of, given his usual placidity, in a language my translator informs me is called isiZulu, which he apparently speaks. "Here comes the lion, father!" Followed by the chorus behind him in beautiful harmony, who seem not to be speakers of isiZulu, but to have learned it by rote. Sithi ingonyama, Messiah repeats his initial line as animals of the savannah are shown raising their heads toward the rising sun. Spectacularly vibrant landscapes, though clearly animated by trichromatic humans, causing me to adjust my main spectrum, mechanical eye to feed me data, matching red, green, blue trichromy, rather than my normal maroon, red, green, teal, blue pentachromy, are shown as Messiah sings at startling volume, backed by Victor, Toon, Brunhilde, Jenny, Krish, Hasiak, and Twila. At 25 seconds in, Messiah stops, followed by 25 seconds of the other's untranslated harmony, repeating, getting a little more insistent each time, as the screen shows animals moving across these terrains towards I know not yet what, though based on the painting. When Messiah sings again, he has switched into Victor's native tongue, which he also seems to be fluent in. The others continue to back him in incomprehensible isiZulu. The lyrics are hopeful and vivacious as we continue to watch the animals on their journey. Having recently flown over Savannah en route to Nipanoy's dinner, I can confidently say that the absolute weight of numbers present is not adequately conveyed, though the variety does seem to be based only on my intuition. Great elephants are shown in low angle to convey their sheer scale. They really do look like gray, four-legged shouso. After around 1 per 5 minutes, we are finally shown the presumable goal of these animals. The rock, the one that looks as if it could not be a natural landform, the one I was stood atop in the mural. A bluebird flies toward it, and the camera follows, revealing a powerfully built lion with a thick red mane. Clearly, this is the inspiration for Victor's depiction. The bird alights before the lion in a way I'm sure no bird, absent a death wish, ever would, and bows deeply in respect. The lion scowls sternly back for a moment, before a smile breaks over his face, and he returns a regal nod. An aged simian is shown parting the crowd and climbing the rock before embracing the powerful lion, as if old friends. The simian is clearly the inspiration for me. I'm not insulted by that, or I'm trying not to be. The lion and simian then approach, presumably, the lion's mate and cub, the inspiration for Korak's and Takak's characterizations, respectively, I think, and Messiah's lead vocals are paused again for a tender scene where the simian breaks a gourd and smears the contents across the cub's forehead before sprinkling dust on him, causing him to sneeze. I wonder if this is a real birth ritual from one of the Terran cultures. I don't remember coming across it in my studies of them. The chorus chant Ingonyama Nengu Enamabala, almost inaudibly at first, but grows steadily louder as Victor passes Messiah something he keeps concealed behind his back, while striding forward, matching the forward motion of the simian carrying the cub. There is a brief moment I believe that the cub is about to be cast from the rock to its death. Terrans are fond of whiplash-inducing tone shifts. I think that would be too much, even for them. My horror is disconfirmed as both Messiah and the simian raise their arms above their heads, the simian with the cub, Messiah with a nano-forged copy of Igthan's plushie. Twila takes over the vocals, maintaining the pitch-perfect, high intensity that Messiah had. The animals cry out, trumpet and screech in celebration, and we are shown a rotating shot of the cub looking down at them. This looks hand-drawn. Someone had to imagine every frame of that rotation, then transfer that to a drawing. That's endlessly artistic Terrans for you. The clouds part and a beam of light illuminates the cub, held aloft by the simian. Twila adjusts the common room's lighting to achieve the same effect. The animals bow in a sweeping pan shot, followed by a shot of the whole scene zooming out, then a percussive toom to introduce the title card. Twila pauses the film there. All of the triple M's are out of breath from their singing and dancing. I begin clapping my wings together to mimic Terran applause, and Korak follows my example, a little bemused. Victor takes a seat on the couch beside me, and I ask, how much rehearsal was required for that little number? Still slightly out of breath, he raises his thumb and index finger a centimeter apart and says, "A bit." I smirk. I'm clearly not working all of you hard enough. If you have all this time to practice song numbers and paint murals. His face falls and he starts, Cap, it's... My wing claw shoots up. A joke, Victor! Take the joke! He smiles. So there are no humans in this story at all? It's an alternate world in which only your uplifts exist in their own atechnological society? I ask quizzically. He frowns contemplatively. No, not uplifts. This was made 2 centuries or so before the first species we uplifted. They're just animals, imagined a bit more human-like. I'm surprised, but I suppose it makes sense that humans would imagine all those possible friends they could make, long before they had the capacity to actually make those friends. So, how many more interactive song numbers are we going to be treated to? I smirk. Victor shakes his head and raises a single finger. Just that one. My rendition of Be Prepared was nixed because it was apparently too frightening. Are you fucking kidding? Can you believe that? I nod. Yes, I can easily imagine being frightened by your singing. In fact, it's happened on multiple occasions. He laughs. Well, interjects Twyla, if everyone's comfortable, shall I unpause? One film viewing later, I walk with Korak back to our quarters. I was so shocked when the uncle killed the father. I laugh. You wouldn't be if you had watched more than about 5 Terran films. That character was too good, too kind, too competent, and too much a deuteragonist. If he'd not died, there would have been no story. I found it very funny when the protagonist and his friends were discussing the nature of stars, and the stupid one was the only one who was right. Then the other mocked him. Korak nods. That was hilarious. Maybe we should watch some more Terran films. That was very entertaining. I smile. If you can stomach being around Victor's Merc Beast when she returns, I'm sure they'll be happy to indulge you of an endless number of viewings, sweet fruit. Though I don't know how often they'll be willing to rehearse song numbers for us. He ponders that as we re-enter our quarters. Thank you so much for giving us the night off, Twyla. I whisper to Twyla's sensor array between the robotic appendages she's been using to tend Takak. She whispers back, You're welcome, Captain. I really enjoyed watching the film with you guys. I'll give you guys some privacy. Let me know anytime you want me to look after Twaki. I'll enjoy both the data streams from looking after her and hanging out with you guys. Win-win, as far as I'm concerned. I smile and she vacates the simple droid she's been inhabiting. Do you want to use the bathroom first? I ask Korak. Thank you, my Okla. I'll be out in 10. He disappears into our shared-in suite, and I go to Takakik, sleeping in her incubator. I reach out my left opposable wing claw and, ever so gently, trace it across her forehead. Sleep well, my little lion. Motherhood. Victor's perspective. I'm sitting in the chair I brought into Cap and Corey's place to spend time with Kaki. I was playing with her earlier, but she tuckered herself out after a bit. She's lying on my palm, utterly zonked right now. It must be hard to keep your energy up when you're so little. Fuck, she's adorable. I'm stroking a single limp finger from her head, down the soft fuzz of her back. If I applied any pressure at all, she'd break. My holopad sounds a single ping, which seems like a gong being struck, in the silence of this room. Despite the fact that I have it set relatively quiet, I take a sharp inhale through my teeth as she stirs, and settles. Phew. I don't want to have to leave immediately after waking her up. Standing carefully, I make my way to her incubator, and gently place her against her plushie. She nestles contentedly into it. My heart. I turn to her parents on their perch and whisper, Sorry, gotta go. Cap smiles and nods a dismissal at me over Corey's sleeping head, and I slink out. Once the door closes, I check the time. I think I have time to go buy hydroponics. It'll be good to get a nice lungful of high oxygen air before what's coming. I feel that gnawing pit of fear in my gut, the one that recently made its rude re-entry into my life. Victor Taylor, you've fought pirates. You've been dismembered. You've guarded expeditions to more than 100 wild death worlds. You have a motherfucking merc beast as a pet. What's coming is nothing to be scared of. That gnawing doesn't seem to be convinced. I miss Fluffy. I've got Sam to scritch, and my plushie. I've got the cuddle puddle. I've got Toon, but I still miss Fluffy, even if I know she's where she needs to be right now, with her kids, helping to find loving homes for them. I pass through the gorgeous room with its bright light, glistening water, and fresh air, and breathe deeply. Even if I have time, I can't dawdle and make a terrible impression if I showed up late. I've also got a ton of stairs to go down. I leave the lovely, rich air of the tranquil room behind me and make my way across the bridge to Deck 17's balcony, turning left to come to the top of the ridiculously shallow access stairway. I begin walking down. As I complete the 3rd downward flight, I recall breaking my arm, falling down stairway 5, blind drunk. It's really embarrassing that even that sloshed, I was able to hurt myself so badly on such a shallow angle. It's good that I've not been that drunk since that night. Eventually, I reach Triple M's balcony and walk inside. I drop to Toon's door. No, our door. My room has effectively become the cuddle puddle room and gun locker. The others have free access to the room, but my guns are only accessible with the analog keys I keep on a chain around my neck. I wave the door open and walk through. Hey, baby, are you ready? Smiles Toon, standing up. As I'll ever be? I grimace. She bends to kiss me, and my nose is hit by that cinnamon, blueberry, vanilla scent medley of hers. I may hold her a little tighter than I usually do. She takes my hands and leads me to the desk where she's set up 2 chairs. I take the seat next to hers and she flicks her holo display to the wall in front of us. It's always a little surreal seeing her monochromatic holo, but I suppose it makes sense if you have no color vision. She opens her contacts and selects one to call. My heart is in my throat as we wait for them to pick up. I try to swallow it back down, futilely. The call is answered, revealing what is either a quite small woman nestled into a very large woman, or a very small woman nestled into a quite large woman. I can't tell as there's nothing in the frame that's a standard size to give me perspective. In black and white, it's also difficult to identify what color exactly their hair, skin, and eyes are more accurately then. The larger one has lightish hair and the smaller one dark. They both have palish eyes and palish skin. The smaller one has a crucifix at her neck, and the larger one the same Mjolnir pendant that Toon has. The smaller one strikes the image of Snow White. The larger one gives off more of a fantasy warrior woman vibe. It always did seem a bit weird when Toon said I was her Prince Charming. Now I think I understand. She meant less in the sense of Rupert Everett, and more in the sense of Beowulf. Toon raises her upper left hand and says, "Hi, Mums! It's lovely to see you!" The 2 women don't answer. Instead, they squint out of the screen at me. "Ha!" booms the larger one. "He's human. Pay up." The smaller one smirks over her shoulder. "I think you'll find, sweetie, that he's also a he. That makes us even. You are a he, aren't you?" That latter directed at me. I respond stupidly. "Mums!" squeals Toon, her cheeks flushed purple. "I go by he, yes," I answer, uncertainly. Smirking over her shoulder again, the smaller one says, "Even?" The larger one grumbles, but doesn't object. The smaller one turns her attention back to me. "So, do you have a name other than he?" I'm so wrong-footed from the unexpected direction this call has taken that it literally takes me a moment to remember my name. "Victor, ma'am, Victor Taylor," I manage eventually. She laughs and says, "While I may be old enough to be your great-great-great-grandmother, I'd appreciate less of the ma'am. You can call me Heidi, son, or Mrs. Arna daughter, if you don't want us to be friends." "Thank you, I say, causing her to cock an eyebrow. "Heidi, Gidja Katrine Thoradotir," beams the larger one. "Katrine to you. It's a pleasure to see the man who thinks he's worthy of my toonie. I don't suppose you keep to foreign sitter, do you?" I have to think for a moment. They're speaking English, but she's just used several New Norse terms without having a translator equipped. Gidja is priestess, is foreign cedar. Are you asking if I'm a Norse pantheonist? I'm afraid I'm not in anything. "Ha! Pay up!" chimes Heidi. "Wait, hang on," objects Katrine. "He's not a Christ worshipper either." I believe, darling, that if you check the ledger, you'll find that you wagered her partner would be a pagan. I wagered he would not be. I didn't wager he'd be Lutheran. Grumbling, Katrine fumbles and Heidi raises her holopad, expectantly, over her shoulder. Katrine taps her own against it, paying whatever they wagered on that. Knowing the scale of that model allows me to roughly work out the scale of the 2 women. I was wrong about the 2 possibilities, and in actual fact, Heidi is roughly average-sized. Katrine is enormous. Could she be taller than me? "Mums, you're really embarrassing me," says Toon, her voice muffled from her face being buried in her hands. "Sorry, Toonie, we're old women, and your mothers. It's difficult not to speculate," smiles Heidi mischievously, before turning her attention back to me. "So, where are you from, Victor?" "Earth, Heidi, South London." Excitedly, Katrine asks, "A Saxon?" I hesitate. I don't know if I'd call myself a Saxon, eh? I might have been born and raised there, but my mum was from Stranraer, and my dad was from Dogger Island. Anglo-Norman surname, but Dogger Island was several meters underwater from about 6,000 years ago, all throughout the Anglo-Saxon age. It wasn't habitable again until 2240, at which point it was settled by people from all over North Europe and beyond. I'm sure you know. Katrine looks slightly disappointed and says, "Ah, shame. We'll be reenacting the Battle of Reading while you're visiting. I'd have loved to have a real Saxon playing Ethelred." I smile, so it'd be my job to lose? She smiles back. "Ha! The boy knows his history. Have you ever done reenacting before?" I shake my head. Can't say I have. I was a bit busy at uni and, well, garden worlders aren't known for their proclivity to reenact Terran history. "You can say ain't, lad. We're not snobs," booms Katrine mirthfully before adding, "Well, I'm not at least," causing a playful slap to the shoulder from Heidi. Fuck! I was register shifting. How long has it been since I've been around anyone who knew and cared that my accent was a bit rough? The triple M's don't care, and even if they did, there'd be no point trying to hide it from them indefinitely. I wanted to make a good impression, so I poshed myself up a bit without thinking. And she called me out on it? I cover up my embarrassment and nod in assent. I wonder if their picture is in color. I'd hate to think they could see the flush in my face. Heidi leans forward, her face concerned. I take it from your use of the past tense that we won't get the opportunity to meet your parents, Victor. I feel my face involuntarily darken as I answer. I'm afraid not. Heidi, they were called up to serve. They both died during the Battle of New Australia. I never met either of them, that I can remember. She nods sympathetically and says, I'm sorry to hear that, Victor. You seem like a fine young man, and I'm certain they'd be proud of you. Thank you, Heidi. I smile somberly. Katrine's face screws slightly in contemplation. How old are you, Victor? Coming up on 30? That's a bit of an age gap, she responds appraisingly. 6 years? More like 6.5, adds Heidi shrewdly. Yes, I suppose so, I answer, shifting uncomfortably at the tacit accusation. And what's your job, Victor? On the ship? Asks Heidi through narrowed eyes. I'm the chief security specialist. So you're Tooney's boss? Reproaches Katrin. You don't think fraternizing with your subordinate is a little unprofessional? Queries Heidi, eyes still narrowed. Mums, that's enough, interrupts Toon, with more fury than I've ever heard in her voice. Maintaining human speed, she continues, I was the one who initiated things between us. He never would have, for exactly that reason. I don't care that he's my boss. I don't care that he's a few years older. I love him, Shin. And that means it's you guys' job to love him too. If you can't do that, then both her mums look as stunned as I feel before Heidi starts. We're sorry, Toonie, we care about you, you know? We want to know that you aren't being taken advantage of. We're sorry. Katrine bursts out laughing, seeming to shock all three of us. I'm not sorry. You must be something quite special, boy, if you not only managed to get Toonie to initiate things, but then got that reaction out of her. Anyone who can make my little girl that fierce has my blessing to be with her. Astonished, I answer, thank you, Katrin. That means a lot. Shaking her head in mock disappointment, Heidi responds, it would be really nice if you could think about things as a mother, for once, rather than a warrior, darling. Bah, no fun in that, smirks Katrin with a single downward wave of her palm. Anyway, continues Heidi, turning her attention back to me and Toon, we should probably talk about the plan for when you guys visit, sometime later. Bye! We all say in unison before Toon cuts off the call. A few seconds of silence follow before I turn to her and say, well, that could have gone a lot worse. Could have gone a lot better, too, she responds, gloomily. I'm so sorry about them grilling you like that. I pull her into a standing position, then into a cuddle before saying, I'm not sorry. I'm glad they're worried about you. That's sort of what I always imagined having a mum would be like. Plus, I pull away just enough to look into her eyes and smile warmly. You realize that was the first time you've used the L word, right? A look of panic crosses her face as she starts, I kiss her tenderly, and that stops her. After some time, I pull away and, looking straight into her eyes, say, I love you too, Toon. I love you more than anything. A radiant smile breaks across her face, and she comes in for another kiss. Her hands move to the hem of my shirt, and before I know what's happening, she's whisked it off me. Guys? Comes a voice that causes both of us to freeze in horror. We can still see you. You never ended the call, reveals Heidi's disembodied voice. Fuck! Toon didn't end the call at all. She just cut off the display. I didn't notice because the buttons were right next to each other and were the same fucking color. Mums, why didn't you say anything? Cries Toon, her face flushed with a more vivid purple than I've ever seen on it. Well, you were having such a lovely moment. I didn't want to interrupt. Nice physique, bro, chimes Katrine, sounding amused. I don't think it matters anymore if they have a color image or not. My flush will show up regardless. Departure. I stand atop Victor's shoulder with Fluffy at his side. His hand is placed between her ears, scritching absently as we walk. Kaz, Dr. Sabir, Dr. Gomes, and a familiar-looking woman walk on her other side. On our right walks Emiko Miyazaki, with Miss Hunter a few paces behind her, wearing ridiculously heavy-looking armor, colored silver and teal with royal blue gauntlets. The only parts of her skin that are visible are the area around her eyes and mouth, her nose and cheeks being protected by guards that jut from the helmet she wears. It has been explained to me that there was an attempt made to place the armor on the hover trolley with her and Emiko's other possessions, but that overloaded it. It must be as heavy as it looks. Turning his head to the one member of the group that I've not been introduced to, Victor says, I really enjoyed your playing in the piazza the other week. I take it you're a Mahale Nsele? Ah, she was the busker who played the sad songs. Seeming surprised to be addressed, she turns her head to Victor. Yes, that's me. I remember you two. You stopped to listen and both tipped, right? Thank you. Victor waves a hand. You played really well, and I enjoyed it. Thank you. It looks as if congratulations are in order. Who was it that asked? What's he talking about? The three of them all reflexively move their respective right hands to their lefts, drawing my attention to the matching rings they wear on their second to last finger. Cass smiles smugly. I asked. The other two look slightly embarrassed. Forgive my ignorance, but asked what? I probe. Cass popped the question cap. They're engaged, answers Victor, turning his face up to mine. I have to think for a moment before I'm able to make sense of that. I thought, aren't Terrans monogamous? I ask uncertainly. Victor chuckles and answers, mostly we are, but you know our general attitude is live and let live. Polys ain't hurting no one, so we ain't gonna tell them they gotta conform to monogamy 'cause they're offending our sensibilities. Before turning back to the three and saying, good luck with the wedding, you three. They smile appreciatively. I think for a moment before saying, I'm sorry to have to take Cass away from the two of you for so long. Will you be all right without her? Dr. Sabir smiles somberly. It's not ideal, but we'll call whenever our schedules all line up and she has FTLCom signal. It'll give us time to plan the wedding. We might even shop around for a clinic to get a child from, though that's not certain yet. Are you not able to have children naturally, I ask? Slightly unsure if I'm being rude. Kaz laughs. We could. Amali and I couldn't get our reproductive cycles reactivated very easily, and Lul could father a child with either of us. But we've all agreed that that's not how we want to do it. If we're going to have kids, we want ones that are an equal mix of all three of us. Our kids, like, not mine and Lou's or Ami's and Lou's. Mine, Ami's, and Lou's. Can't do that the natural way. I chew that over for a bit. Dr. Gomes turns to Victor. You really don't mind about me taking Gloam? I know Fluffy is okay with it, but Victor shakes his head. I can't imagine a better home for him. Lul's told me about all the prima donnas you've had to chase off. Sorry about that. If you're happy to take him, and Fluffy's happy with you taking him, I'm happy. Honestly, the only reason I didn't suggest you or Lul adopting any of them, myself, was because I assumed if it was feasible, you'd suggest it. Didn't want to pressure you. Dr. Gomes looks pleased, and there is a brief silence as we walk. After a while, Emiko says, I'm glad that we're finally going to be underway. I don't believe Merc Beast weaning has ever been given as an official reason for delay before. Probably ever, not just as long as the ODR has existed. I know it's only been a week since the last of the other arrangements were made, but that is a week in which, however unlikely, the species may have died out from one thing or another. Kaz whips her head to Emiko and says, Can you talk about that with these three here? They're not under NDA. Emiko smiles. They're not idiots, are they? I'm sure, even if you didn't tell them, they were able to work it out, as long as they don't go selling the story to a tabloid site or bandying it about the Galenet. Well, there'll be no need for ODR officers to knock on their door, will there? She just spoke so sweetly yet from the look on Drs. Gomez's, Sabir's, and Miss Nexila's faces. It's clear that they understood the threat. Turning her attention to me, Emiko asks, You're certain about the stops? Shin de Chin, Neonesia, and Nova Fennoscandia. If you divert us around any of those, it will cause delays, as we'll either need to wait for the personnel, currently making their way to those planets, to meet us on another or find replacements for them. I smile and look forward at the gates of Baharia Kaskazini, coming into view. Quite sure, Emiko's no need to fret, causing a satisfied nod from her. I assume I'll have the opportunity to meet the three I haven't yet at the party tonight, I query. You should do. I've made it clear that it will be a good chance to get to know the crew, so they oughtn't to hide in their rooms on deck 4, meh? She answers. Good, I'll look forward to it. We reach the gate and are surrounded by an escort of, fully armed and armored, soldiers who walk us across the barracks grounds. It's a little ironic that they're willing to allow a merc beast to roam freely about town, with only Victor to guard her, but here in the place on the planet where she'd most quickly be neutralized, if she were to suddenly rampage. She needs a full guard. We enter the hangar, and before we begin climbing the boarding ramp, Cass hugs her fiancé and fiancé goodbye, with not a few tears. We board the ship, waving goodbyes at Dr. Sabir and Gomes, as well as Miss Nexel. I have to get to the bridge to take us up, but the rest of you can stay here to wave them off as we ascend, if you like, I say, addressing the group. There are smiles and nods from all of them as I make my way through the starboard side door. Emiko and Miss Hunter have no one to wave goodbye to, but make no move to leave. They probably want to admire the view as we take off. Later, Captain on bridge, sings Twyla as as I walk through the door. The bridge crew stand and render their respective species salutes. I dip my head and slightly extend my wings, indicating them to return to their posts. I always felt such pomp a little unnecessary on a civilian ship, but was overruled by my clan mother on the question of whether to do away with it. I step atop the captain's perch and have my communications officer patch me through to local aerospace control. This is Captain Takkal of the Bright Plume, requesting permission to take off. We hear you, Captain. Sending a route out of system now. The route appears on the display in front of me, and, double-checking that there are no issues with it, I lock it in. Route confirmed. Confirmed you are cleared for takeoff. Twila begins our ascent out of the hangar, and the Zanzibari vista is visible for a few minutes, outside the front window, before we angle upwards and begin our atmospheric exit. I've greatly enjoyed myself on this planet. I wonder if I'll ever return. Sad evening, ship time. Having brought the ship to warp and made my way from the bridge to the central section of Deck Zero, I enter the canteen to see it crowded with nearly every crew member. With the new additions, humans are now the single most numerous species aboard. It's interesting to see how they dominate the room. Emiko holds court over a crowd composed of about 9 different species. Miss Hunter stood close behind her, thankfully out of her armor. I would hate to think how much more uncomfortable she'd make people if she were still dressed like that. Victor and Toon seem to be acquainting themselves with what I presume to be the ODR's Garden Worlder contingent from Zanzibar. Lieutenant Loper is talking animatedly to Quidge and Jup about something. The Zunbaris are having a pleasant chat with the Shings and a few others. Dr. Mink is sitting nearby, wearing what seems to be her trademark glower. Krish and Hasiak are sitting with Sha'anza, Igthan, Wahambaham, and Hamtonio, laughing about something. Even Sha'anza seems at ease. She's typically one of the more anxious members of the crew. Then my eyes alight on a table at which sit 3 humans? Certainly 2 of them are human, but the third, she looks the wrong height to be an adult, but the wrong proportions to be a child. Not that there should be a child on a mission like this. They aren't talking with anyone, even each other. Let's fix that. I make my way to the table and raise my wing in greeting. Hello, you 3. I don't believe we've met. Might I join you? Seeming a little taken aback, they nod in assent and gesture to the empty stool. Neol Hatathli, says one. Kwang Pan, says the second. Olga Petrikov, says the third. The very short one I'm not entirely sure is the same species as the other 2. Takkal, a pleasure to meet all of you. I answer, choosing to forego my clan name and rank in the interests of modesty. I turn my attention to Miss Petrikov and carefully start, forgive me, but are you a Yes, I'm Terran. Yes, I'm human. Yes, I'm Homo sapiens. Yes, I'm an adult. It's called achondroplasia, or more generally, dwarfism. Yes, I could get it treated with gene therapy. No, I don't want to. She interrupts wearily. I sincerely apologize, Ms. Petrikov. I didn't mean to offend you, I say. This is clearly a sore spot for her. It's fine. It's just I have to have the same conversation with everyone I meet. The same questions every time. I know it's not your fault. Garden worlds tend to produce very genetically homogeneous populations, and garden worlders tend to correct all irregularities with intervention. So you're not used to people who look so divergent from their species norm. Don't worry about it. It's more insulting when I have to have the conversation with Terrans. I choose not to ask why she does not wish to be treated, what with the difficulties she must face for being shorter than me, in a society where most people aren't achondroplasic. Given the exhausted way she answered the rest of my questions before I'd asked them, it would probably be irritating. Instead, I ask, what is your profession, Miss Petrikov? It's very unusual that I have to ask the job title of a person aboard my ship. This is the first time I've had anyone employed aboard that I didn't personally hire. I'm an analyst. When we get to AG 10790263B, it'll be my job to lead the interpretation of all the data we get back from the orbital scans and ground team. I won't be going down myself, she winks. I nod. What about you 2? Mr. Hatathli? Mr. Fan? Well, we're observers from the UTC's Humanitarian Corps. It's our job to treat any injuries, make sure the species gets treated humanely, and report any incidents and violations to the GU, ODR, and UTC, responds Fan. I'm sure we'll appreciate your efforts. Our existing medics wouldn't be cleared for Death World excursions, I say mirthfully. Hatathli leans conspiratorially across the table to me and says, Hey, Takkal, how much do you know about the captain? I am about to say that I am the captain, but to stop myself, and this might be interesting. A fair bit, and why? What have you heard? I heard she gave Mistress Miyazaki a telling off during the briefing, laughs Hatathli. I heard she's the original pilot of the ODR's security officer program. I heard that the last week we've been waiting to set off was because there was a merc beast at the uni that she was waiting to bring aboard, adds Fan. I heard she rode that merc beast to the rescue when they fought those pirates they brought in, laughs Miss Petrikov. You can't believe everything you hear. All true. I state with some amusement at the look of disbelief that instantly falls over their faces. Though, in her defense, the merc beast was brought onto the ship by CSS Taylor. She was originally very against keeping it and only reluctantly agreed after he pointed out that the rules allow any and all pet types that are not actively aggressive to sapients. And, well, the first time she escaped confinement, she proved herself tame. Just about. All three of them look back at me with Death Worlder distrust. How do you know all that? Asks Petrikov. Well, I'm very plugged into the goings-on aboard the ship. The captain and I are quite close. Furrowing his brow, Hatatli asks, What's your job, Takal? Just then, Victor shouts, Cap! Causing every pair of eyes facing me to widen. Mine twist into an amused smile. I see you're making friends, he says, drawing up to the table. Just so, Victor, these three and I were just discussing your unorthodox choice of companion animal, I respond, still mirthful. Oh, they were asking about Fluffy? He turns his attention to the others, smiling. You're all welcome in Triple M anytime you want to meet her. Victor, calls Toon from across the room. Oop, you gotta go. See you around, he smiles, turning to leave. They stare disbelievingly from his back as he walks away, back to me. It's a rather euphoric feeling to have pulled the wool over the eyes of a table full of Terrans. We've been tricked, we've been backstabbed, and we've been, quite possibly, bamboozled, laughs Hatatli. Indeed you have been, I nod. Why didn't you tell us you were the captain? Asks Fan. I was interested in the candid things you'd say when you didn't know. I hope you can forgive the deception, I say with a Terran wink. I can't believe a garden worlder just managed to trick all three of us, sighs Petrikov. Astonishing. Still smiling, I answer, Don't feel too bad. According to Mr. Taylor, I have the dubious distinction of being an honorary death worlder. I stand to leave before turning back to them. If you wish to be astonished some more, well, you might try mingling a little. Garden worlders might surprise you. You're a little unapproachable, huddled in this corner like this. With three looks of mild embarrassment, they begin getting up from the table to make their respective ways toward groups they might mingle with. I hope they get on well enough with everyone. It could be a long voyage otherwise. Play. Will you sit down, girl? I can't relax with you hovering like that, says Emiko with a pretense of frustration. Mistress Miyazaki, if you are approached from behind, says Miss Hunter, face placid and unreadable. If I am approached from behind in a room full of people, someone will spot the attacker, won't they? If you're worried that anyone at the table has intentions on my life, then you'd surely be better placed to protect me in this space between me and your girlfriend, wouldn't you? Grins Emiko. Miss Hunter has a brief and, to me, unreadable expression pass over her face as she takes her seat between Emiko and Lieutenant Lo Oz-san. Everyone's attention returns to the tabletop. A display of a miniature war zone is projected there. In front of Cass stands an army of mechanical, vaguely humanoid skeletons. There were a lot more at the start of the game. In front of Jenny stands an army of green humanoids with tusks, whose technology looks to have been cobbled together from scrap metal. She definitely appears to be winning, based solely on numbers. In front of Victor stands a fortress defended by Terrans, after a fashion. The odd one, whose body or head is fully exposed, look like Homo sapiens. The rest, well, they're nearly as wide as they are tall and have an overall volume that make the black armor they wear look less like armor and more like small mech suits. Are they mech suits? The usual sleekness of Terran battle armor is, in this universe, adorned with symbols, the full significance of many of which I'm certain must be missing my beak. There are a lot of human skulls on them, though. The way they've been fighting thus far has been frightening, as has Victor's roleplay. This seems to be a canon in which not only are humans exactly the terrifying monsters we always imagined Deathworlders would be, but every race in the galaxy is as well, leading to a state of constant all-out war. How old is this game? I quietly asked Brunhilde. This? 700 years. 8? I'd guess closer to 7. And your battle armor? It didn't look like that in that period, did it? I query. Fairly certain I know the answer. She chuckles. No, that style of armor wasn't viable until we had Durasteel. Had to wait until about 200 years ago. Of course, it wasn't really all that useful until the First Contact War. I consider the fact that Terrans so closely predicted the style of armor they wouldn't have for half a millennium. Kaz raises a fist containing many cuboid random number generators, which she scatters on the table. She enters a command I don't fully comprehend with a stony face. Though, unlike the unreadable expression that Miss Hunter always wears, I can see furious calculation going on behind her eyes. Her gleaming steel skeletons advance on Jenny's army of monsters and fail to have much effect. Crush them all! Screams Jenny, rolling her cubes while role-playing the personality apparently assigned to her faction. Indeed, her roles allow her to finish the last of Cass' forces. Cass throws up her arms and says, "This game is impossible. How are you meant to win?" Now having dropped the ice-cold silence that was her roleplay. "Being better," says Jenny, not dropping her facade. This causes Cass to screw up her eyes and purse her lips in a mocking expression. It's Victor's turn, and, affecting a sophisticated manner of speech that is translated to make him sound like the son of a clan mother, though with harshness and aggression that I'm sure no clan mother's progeny has ever had, and using his hollow pad, hung at his neck, as a voice changer to give his voice a gravelly, garbled, robotic quality, says, "Sons and daughters of the Imperium, forgive me that I must order you to waste ammunition against the worthless bodies of these Xeno scum. Those who would dare defile our holy city must have their carcasses cast from its walls. This is our city. This is our world. Cry it out so the bastards in orbit will hear our fury. Glory to the God Emperor." He casts his randomizers and then screams, "Fire!" immediately followed by his forces unleashing a withering volley against Jenny's. About a quarter of her remaining monsters are felled by Victor's attack, but she still outnumbers him. It being her turn now, she releases her chance pieces and smiles before entering a command that sees Victor's walls scaled and troops massacred and bloody hand to hand. "Wah!" she screams as his troops are hacked apart by hers. Her turn ended. Victor looks certain to have lost, only having a handful of troops remaining, entirely surrounded by Jenny's green, tusked monsters. With no roleplay, this time he scoops up his cubes and drops them, before a sinister smile adorns his face. "Exterminatus," he says, now affecting somber disconsolation. Shock breaks over my face as the arena is engulfed in vicious explosions. When the firestorm is cleared, it reveals no surviving troops of any faction. Victor throws up his hands in triumph. "I am undefeated." Fearsome pretense now dropped and holopad inferring, presumably, from its interface with his translator, that he does not wish this speech to be roboticized. "Bullshit you are," cries Jenny with an accusing point. "Every time you start losing, you pull an exterminatus out of your arse." Victor smirks. "Yes, thus making me undefeated. You did agree to play with it enabled as an option. I think we're going to need to revisit that decision," says Cass with a cocked eyebrow. "I realize that the game is a lot less fun when you can just flip the table whenever you're going to lose. How long do you think your undefeated streak will last if you can't blow everyone up from orbit to force a draw?" I interrupt, still rather horrified. "I'm sorry, Victor just used orbital bombardment. On his own troops?" Jenny gives a mirthful smirk. "Not just orbital bombardment, Captain. He glassed the planet." I look around the room and see no indication of deception. I'll never understand how you Terrans can be such teddy bears in real life, and yet have such horrible imaginations, I say, shaking my head to convey my disbelief. To my knowledge, the GU never even considered glassing worlds until our war with the Terrans, long after we had the capability to do so. To imagine it when your species hasn't even left your home system. To imagine glassing your own world simply to deny it to an enemy. My musing on that is interrupted by Brunhilde asking, "Hey, guys, do you ever think that, well, we consume a lot of pop culture from the 20th and 21st centuries, don't we?" Her hands absently working through the fur of a very comfortable-looking Sam. "How do you figure?" asks Victor, one arm now around a content-looking tune, the other hand between a blissful-looking Fluffy's ears. She frowns. "Well, the film we watched the other week, the amount of early tech-age songs we sing, games we play, books we know, films we watch, etc., etc. You think if someone was watching us from the 21st century, they might come to the conclusion that there had been no cultural development for the centuries in between then and now?" Jenny laughs. "That's what you'd be worried about in that scenario, Hildy? Not the fifth dimensional peeping Toms? You'd be worried about them being judgmental of our pop culture choices?" "Well, when you put it like that," responds Brunhilde. Victor has a pensive expression on his face as he says, "I think you're right, Samus. I'd think if someone was looking in on us, it very easily could look to him like there's been no pop culture since about 2050. But I think that'd be for a very specific reason." "Why don't you enlighten us?" interjects Hasiak, her arms and tail firmly encasing a relaxed-looking Krish. "Well, it'd be because they'd skip over all the stuff that wouldn't mean nothing to them, wouldn't it? They ain't going to be interested in watching us watch films from the 25th century or listen to the latest hits by Fleem X, are they? wouldn't mean nothing to them. They'd be much more interested in us enjoying stuff that they knew, stuff they enjoyed, and stuff they understood. If you cherry pick only the early tech age pop culture we enjoy, it'd look like we'd either had a barren cultural dark age for the last 600 or 700 years, or like we were all huge nerds for early tech age stuff, wouldn't it? There is a silence as the room at large considers that. The silence is broken by Krish, speaking out from beneath his serpentine girlfriend's head on a complete subject change. I have a question for you. I'd really prefer not to call you Mistress Miyazaki. Emiko smiles. You can call me Emiko. I keep telling this one to call me that, but she insists on maintaining a professional relationship with me, she says, indicating Miss Hunter. I've never been particularly in love with being Mistress Miyazaki either. What's your question, young man? I was just wondering about the planet. From the sounds of it, they haven't even developed radio transmissions yet. Isn't there a risk of cultural contamination? We could drastically affect the way they view existence, couldn't we? If they're banging rocks together to make spears and we tear out of the sky in a starship, isn't there a pretty high chance that they'll, I don't know, think we're gods or something, says Krish apprehensively. Emiko smiles. Ah, you're asking if there isn't some prime directive? If we might get all the way out there and find that they're too primitive to contact at the moment, and we need to turn back. I'm going to turn this question over to the room's only garden worlder. Kakal, she turns her head to me. Before Terran first contact, what was the GU's policy on first contacts? Feeling slightly put on the spot by her asking me a question she clearly knows the answer to, I think before saying, well, it was to get to sapient species as early as we could, offer them a seat in parliament, work out a plan for technological, cultural, and population exchange, and I suppose bring them into the fold. We considered it a moderate failure if a species had managed to get starbound before we'd found them. She gives an approving smile and nods. And why did you want to get to them so early? I suppose, humanitarian reasons? That's not exactly how we would have put it. It was thought about more in terms of the calculus of survival. They are better off spread across multiple worlds, with access to the technology that has come from uncountable eons of trial and error, rather than bound, precariously, to a single planet with only what they've been able to develop themselves. And we are better off with one more unique species perspective on any problem. There are ways of thinking that any species will have that will be unique to them, allowing them to solve problems that we can't. It's better to be friends. I suppose. Now that I say it aloud, I realize how much it sounds like Terran reasoning. We want more friends, don't we? More friends equals sign better. And how much thought was given to cultural contamination? She asks, again clearly knowing the answer. Effectively, none. It was assumed that no culture could be so mimetic as to replace that of an entirely different species, that no species could be so influenceable as to have their culture erased by contact with outsiders. There would be loanwords, concepts they hadn't thought about, concepts they had thought about that no one else had, but that would be about the extent of it. Miyazaki smiles. Put your hand up if you think that's true. No one's hand goes up. Obviously, Terran history is fraught with examples of cultural erasure and assimilation after first contacts between people, something almost unheard of on pre-contact garden worlds. Usually not through mimeticism, but rather military might and greed. It took us a long time to get over the zero-sum thinking of our agricultural age. In order for me to have more, someone else must have less. In order for me to win, someone else must lose. That's a mindset that carried on right up until unification. However, the ODR is now equipped with protocols for first contact from both Garden World Doctrine and Death World Doctrine. We are reasonably confident that we can avoid any headhunting wars, like the Ecuadorian Shuar had, and societal breakdowns, like what happened to the Yuryorant of Australia. We're also pretty sure we can avoid being worshipped as gods. She winks to Krish. Just then, Twyla says, Plus Ultra are on their way here. I assume we want to let them in? She is met by a chorus of agreement. A few moments pass before the common room door opens, followed by 3 humans and 2 garden worlders entering the room uncertainly. 4/5 of the group freeze upon seeing Fluffy. Miss Petrikov strides forward straight to her. She's gorgeous. Can I give her a hug? She addresses Victor. Sure, he smiles. She ain't got a translator anymore, but, well, she'll let us know if she ain't in the mood to be touched. The diminutive woman buries her arms in Fluffy's fur and presses the side of her face against her shoulder. Fluffy turns her head to give the other side of Petrikov's face a lick with her enormous tongue. Gah, so rough, shrieks a laughing Petrikov. Sorry, but probably should have warned you she'd want a lick.